The Battle of the Alamo has long been enshrined as a symbol of heroism and sacrifice in American history. Brave defenders, hopeless odds, a desperate fight for freedom. These are the images etched into the collective memory. But behind the legend lies a strange tapestry of unanswered questions, contradictions, and historical oddities that many people never learn about. What really happened during those 13 fateful days in 1836? Why do so many parts of the story simply not add up? Today, we pull back the veil and explore 8 strange things about the Alamo that have never truly made sense. One of the strangest things about the Alamo is the question that hovers over the entire event. Why was it defended at all? The Alamo was never meant to be a defensive fortress. It was a former Spanish mission, built for religious purposes, not warfare. The crumbling walls were barely adequate for protection, and the structure lacked the strong fortifications necessary to withstand a real siege. When Mexican President and General Antonio López de Santa Anna marched his army toward Texas to crush the rebellion, the logical military move would have been for the Texan defenders to abandon the Alamo and regroup with Sam Houston's main army. Instead, about 200 Texan volunteers, including legendary figures like James Bowie, William B. Travis, and Davy Crockett, chose to stay and fight, even though they knew reinforcements were unlikely, and that the Mexican forces outnumbered them by a margin of at least 6-1. Historians still argue whether the defense was a strategic decision meant to delay Santa Anna's advance or an act of suicidal bravado born of stubborn pride. Either way, it remains one of the strangest tactical choices in military history. One of the most iconic images associated with the Alamo is the story of William B. Travis drawing a line in the sand with his sword and asking the defenders to step over it if they were willing to stay and fight to the death. It's a powerful and cinematic moment, taught in schools and retold in countless books and movies. But did it really happen? The only source for the line in the sand story came from a single man, a survivor named Louis Moses Rose, who supposedly fled the Alamo rather than cross the line. Rose's account surfaced decades after the battle and was secondhand at best. No contemporary eyewitness records mention Travis drawing a line. Many historians believe the event was fabricated or heavily embellished to romanticize the defenders' bravery. Without hard evidence, it's possible that the most famous moment in Alamo lore was a dramatic invention designed to elevate a tragedy into myth. Davy Crockett, frontiersman, politician, and folk hero, is one of the most legendary figures tied to the Alamo. According to early accounts, Crockett died heroically in battle, fighting fiercely until the end. However, conflicting stories emerged suggesting a far less romantic outcome. Several Mexican officers later claimed that Crockett and a handful of survivors surrendered after the battle was lost, only to be executed on Santa Anna's orders. This version of events paints a far grimmer picture, shattering the image of Crockett dying with musket in hand. The truth remains murky, with historians divided over which account is more credible. The idea that one of America's greatest folk heroes may have died not fighting, but begging for his life, continues to unsettle the sanitized version of the Alamo story we are often taught. We often view the Alamo as a pure struggle for freedom, a small band of idealists fighting for Texas independence from Mexico. But the reality is far messier. Many of the men fighting at the Alamo were recent American immigrants who had little allegiance to Mexico or even to Texas itself. Their primary concerns often revolved around issues like land rights, the legalization of slavery, and economic opportunity. Mexico had abolished slavery in 1829, and many American settlers in Texas were slaveholders eager to preserve their way of life. For them, the rebellion was as much about securing personal wealth and maintaining the institution of slavery as it was about lofty ideals of liberty. This uncomfortable truth complicates the narrative of noble freedom fighters and raises difficult questions about what exactly was being fought for at the Alamo. One of the enduring mysteries of the Alamo is why help never arrived. Throughout the siege, Travis sent desperate letters pleading for reinforcements, famously concluding one of them with the line, "Victory or death." And yet, despite these urgent appeals, very few additional troops came to the defenders' aid. Sam Houston, the commander of the Texan Army, ordered Colonel James Fannin to march to the Alamo's relief. But Fannin hesitated, delayed, and ultimately never arrived, citing poor logistics and fear of ambush. In the end, only small groups of volunteers trickled into the fort, nowhere near enough to make a difference. Whether it was cowardice, incompetence, or simply the harsh realities of frontier warfare, the lack of reinforcements doomed the defenders, and remains a haunting element of the Alamo story. Whether it was cowardice, incompetence, or simply the harsh realities of frontier warfare, the lack of reinforcements doomed the defenders, and remains a haunting element of the Alamo story. One of the enduring mysteries of the Alamo is why help never arrived. Throughout the siege, Travis sent desperate letters pleading for reinforcements, famously concluding one of them with the line, "Victory or death." And yet, despite these urgent appeals, very few additional troops came to the defenders' aid. Sam Houston, the commander of the Texan Army, ordered Colonel James Fannin to march to the Alamo's relief. But Fannin hesitated, delayed, and ultimately never arrived, citing poor logistics and fear of ambush. In the end, only small groups of volunteers trickled into the fort, nowhere near enough to make a difference. Whether it was cowardice, incompetence, or simply the harsh realities of frontier warfare, the lack of reinforcements doomed the defenders and remains a haunting element of the Alamo story. Despite the Alamo's fame, first-hand eyewitness accounts of the battle are surprisingly scarce. Almost all of the Texan defenders were killed, and the few non-combatants who survived, mostly women, children, and enslaved people, left only fragmentary, second-hand testimonies. Even among Mexican soldiers, detailed reports are rare and often contradictory. This lack of reliable primary sources has left historians struggling to piece together the true events of the battle. As a result, much of what we know about the Alamo is based on legend, rumor, and later retellings that may have little basis in fact. The lack of solid evidence opens the door for endless speculation and myth-making, making the Alamo as much a product of imagination as it is of history. Perhaps the strangest thing of all is how the Alamo, a small doomed battle that lasted less than 2 weeks, became one of the most powerful symbols of American identity. The story of the Alamo was heavily promoted after the Texas Revolution, and later during the expansion of the American West. It fit perfectly with the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that America was destined to spread across the continent. Movies, novels, and even Walt Disney played a major role in mythologizing the Alamo, turning it into a simplistic tale of good versus evil. In reality, the story was far more complex, filled with moral ambiguity, strategic blunders, and human frailty. Yet the legend persisted, shaping not only how Americans view their past, but also how they understand concepts like bravery, sacrifice, and freedom. The Alamo became more than just a place, it became an idea. And like all powerful ideas, it was shaped more by what people wanted to believe than by what actually happened. The Alamo is a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems. Behind the heroic images and stirring slogans lie unanswered questions, conflicting accounts, and uncomfortable truths. By digging deeper into the strange realities of the Alamo, we gain a richer, more human understanding of the people who lived, fought, and died there. The legend of the Alamo will likely endure for generations to come. But perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to those who perished is not blind hero worship, but an honest search for the truth.